Getting ready for Super Bowl 59, doing a little mailbag as we do weekly here on Peacock and Williamson, comparing NFC quarterbacks. How many of them could take the Eagles to the Super Bowl like Jalen Hurts has? And what are the Commanders' offseason to-dos? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love and appreciate all the everydayers out there. Thanks for stopping by. Hit that thumbs up so we know you're here. And of course, the new listeners, welcome. Please hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. And today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Getting into the mailbag here this week and some questions. Let's see a Senior Bowl question in there as well. And I think there are some clear winners early on in the Senior Bowl. I think on another podcast, we will have to just go through a whole list of the winners and losers so far at the Senior Bowl. Could possibly even do 2 episodes on that, Matt, because I think there's early winners just from like guys weighing in and being bigger or smaller than expected is a big one. And then after the week is done and the game is done, I think you have a really good grasp on who made themselves a lot of money at Senior Bowl. Do you have any early winners or losers at the Senior Bowl? I know Jalen Milroe's small hands is a pretty big one.
He struggled.
Ends go, and then he's not throwing the ball well, and people are like, "Oh, this is what happens." You kind of see something, and then you look for it, and you start to see it everywhere, right? So you're like, "Oh, he's got small hands. That's why he throws it like this, and that's why he's a little bit inaccurate over here, like this." And for those of you who don't know, he weighed in with 8-something-inch hands, sub 9 inch, and essentially, there's never been a good quarterback with sub 9-inch hands in the NFL. Like the best one might have been Kenny Pickett recently,
right?
Is a first-round pick.
Yeah, and Milroe's someone I'm really intrigued with. I mean, he's a supreme athlete. He's a really good deep thrower. He's super smart. I guess he won like academic All-American type stuff. But boy, short to intermediate is a real problem. And to be frank and to be fair to him, this isn't a great environment for him. 7-on-7 drills when the ball should never hit the ground isn't really his specialty. And maybe the small hands has something to do with it. I mean, I'm sure people are digging into that heavily. But I also know how this process goes, that his stock down. And then the game rolls around and he runs for 70 yards and is the game MVP. Everyone's like, oh, stock up. Then he goes to Indy and runs a 4.3 and, oh, he's going in the top 10. We all overreact.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, this is what we expected him to be.
The small sample of what the next data point is. And right now in the offseason, the only data point is Senior Bowl, which is why so many guys could have an awesome week at the Senior Bowl and make so much money, because it's like the big catalyst into the offseason and into the draft season. I think maybe the biggest winner so far this week, and certainly the most viral player this week so far, is Mike Green out of Marshall.
Oh, yeah. Edge
rusher. And another, probably the top offensive lineman at the Senior Bowl, Josh Connerly, he put him straight on his back and showed up over 6'3" and 250 pounds, which I think was huge for Mike Green. So certainly solidified himself in the first round conversation. So early big winner and loser for me is probably Milroe and Mike Green.
Those are good ones. I mean, we could go, like I said, we could do 2 whole shows on different stock up, stock downs. And we're recording this on Thursday. I haven't watched the Thursday stuff yet.
Right.
But Wednesday's the best day. Wednesday's the most physical day. That's when they're fully padded. They're a little more acclimated. And the linemen really show up. And as you mentioned, Green is absolutely one of the stars of the show. But it's a really good lineman Senior Bowl, especially D lineman Senior Bowl.
Here's a question from, this one comes from, actually, this is from JDS, but he's relaying a question from our friend Peter Bukowski of Locked On Packers, who says, how many NFC quarterbacks could have taken this Eagles team to the Super Bowl?
It's a great question. And I think Hurts is coming off his best game of the year. So that's encouraging. Or maybe that's as good as it gets. Is that good enough to beat the Chiefs? Who knows? So just scanning the divisions as I usually do, I think Jayden Daniels could. Stop me if you disagree with any. I think a healthy Dak Prescott could. And I think both those would be upgrades and open the offense a little more, especially Dak as a passer. And in the South, I'm going to go, I think Mayfield. But Mayfield also might lose you a game that you don't want him to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he might make some bigger plays with his arm, but then also might throw one of the games away.
Yeah. I'm going to say yes on Goff. I'm going to say yes on Love. Darnold? Recent memory, recent biases, I can't give you Darnold, but bigger body of work, maybe. I think Stafford's a yes.
Yeah.
I think Purdy's a yes. Kyler could go either way for me.
So.
And Geno's probably a no, but I think he's an underrated player overall.
I feel like it's disrespectful to Jalen Hurts' question, but at the same time, there is half a dozen. You named almost 10 guys.
I don't think I'm going to get a lot of argument there. I mean, maybe Kyler's a no, maybe Baker's a no, maybe someone's anti-Purdy, but I think they're all similar.
One thing I will say is Jalen Hurts, I think, is the best quarterback at the tush push. And I think part of why they're so good at it is up front, but part of it is him. And he like squats 600 pounds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is part of that, and that's something that they do really well. So there are some things that Jalen Hurts does really well, and there are reasons why his teams have been good, and he's a good quarterback. But as compared to some of the other quarterbacks in the tournament, I would put him behind most of those guys, behind Jayden Daniels, and behind obviously Lamar and Mahomes and Josh Allen and those guys. So it's an interesting question, and I think it's just a really good statement to how good the Philadelphia Eagles are, particularly up front. And I've brought up the stat about the yards before contact for Saquon Barkley, because Saquon Barkley obviously is dynamic as heck in the open field, and then he gets a 4-yard head start before anybody touches him on every single carry, and a lot of times much more than 4 yards. And so it's just it's a cheat code sometimes with how good they are up front. And so dominating people on the offensive and defensive line, and obviously it's something they're gonna have to do in the Super Bowl, because they don't have the advantage at quarterback.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying that if you put Jared Goff in that offense, you wouldn't call the same plays or run the same offense. Of course. You probably wouldn't even tush push, but I do think if you give that coaching staff Goff on the first day of training camp, they could still be in the Super Bowl now. You know what I mean? And A.J. Brown would have more yards, and Devontae Smith would have more yards, et cetera. I mean, obviously every quarterback's different. But I also think that he does hinder the passing game a little. And I know we're going to talk Washington here probably in this next segment, but I think that there's a small trend that some teams are going to try to emulate, that if you could give me a B+ or better running back matched with a B+ or better running quarterback, and I'm talking about Baltimore and Philly, and because I've been asked a couple times, like, should Washington add GT if they can? And that's, I don't know. They have other needs, don't get me wrong. Or should they take Hampton at the end of the first round to have that 1-2 punch? I do think opposing defenses are really struggling with that right now. A quarterback and a running back that are like equally as good runners for their position. And that's a unique challenge, especially with a great line.
Next, we're going to talk Washington Commanders. What's their to-do list? They've got a late first-round pick now after drafting number 2 in the 2024 NFL draft. And Matthew Stafford announcing he's not retiring, coming back for another run, for at least one more run in 2025. All that and more next. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying, and if you were going to get any money back at all, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return. while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So Washington Commanders, an interesting offseason for them. Way ahead of schedule on their rebuild. They've got themselves a superstar quarterback. So money in the bank now for this football team. And considering their money's in the bank, Joey Bag of Donuts brings up how this build should go, which I think it wouldn't be a bad idea for them to, okay, we had a plan last year. That plan might have to change a little bit, and maybe you accelerate things. The question from Joey, should teams like Washington that have a franchise quarterback on a rookie deal go for it all now while they have him on the rookie deal? Those huge quarterback deals really hurt teams.
This is a tough one because I'm so enamored with Daniels and I really like their coaching staff and they way outkick their coverage. But it reminds me a little of the Texans a year ago too, where they're screaming plexiglass principle. You take a massive step forward. In Aaron Schatz's honor, who joined us on Wednesday, you're likely to take a step back. And they don't have a high pick, as you mentioned. Their draft capital's just okay. It's not great. They do have a lot of cap space, but it's not hard to find needs on this team either. I mean, first off, a lot of the guys they brought in, or some of the key guys they brought in, are old. The Wagners and Ekelars and Ertz. And I love that Ertz said after the game, he's like, man, I wish I was 25 so I could play with Jayden Daniels for the next decade. Well, You're not.
Yeah.
So am I going to keep reinvesting in old guys, or let those guys move on their way and move to Ben Sinnott like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's a great point because some key contributors of that team are already aging veterans. So they have needs beyond those guys, but they have to replace those guys too.
Right.
So there's no shortage of needs on this football team, even the spots where they were okay at linebacker, like Bobby Wagner.
And I love McLaurin, but he's 30. Like they need another receiver and probably a young one. Another offensive lineman would be nice. What's Cosby's injury going to last into next year? I don't know that. Mentioned running back. That seems like a massive luxury for a team that is still light. I mean, I still think they're below average and talent roster, don't you? I mean, of maybe average, but they're not a top 10 roster. That's for sure.
Yeah. Plenty of holes on that roster.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think on one hand, the answer to the question is yes, because you can do so much while you have use that opportunity while you have this extra cap space to build around that quarterback and build a super team around it. We saw the 49ers do the same thing. The 49ers are going to look very different 2026, 2027 if they sign Brock Purdy to a $60 million a year contract, right? Because it is not going to, first of all, guys are going to age out and you're not going to be able to pay the highest paid left tackle, highest paid running back, highest paid tight end, highest paid linebacker, highest paid defensive end. You can't do, two $30 million a year wide receivers. You can't do that. You can do that when you have a $900,000 quarterback. You can't do that when you have a $60 million quarterback. And we saw the first thing that the Kansas City Chiefs did when they signed Mahomes to the $500 million contract was trade away the best offensive weapon in Tyreek Hill. And so your quarterback has to be good enough to do the rest. But here's the thing with Jayden Daniels is, do they even have, he's already there. It's like, because how we always talk about everything you can do for a young quarterback, offensive line, receivers, to help him out. Well, he already insta developed. So do you have to do that?
And he might be helping those guys out as opposed to the other way around. Right.
So let him elevate the offense and just put everything on the defensive side of the ball.
So the more I think about this, I think I would take this approach and I would sort of hedge my bets that you have, because he developed so quickly, you have Daniels on 4 more cost-controlled seasons. That's great. You have 4 more, including the 5th-year option, which I'm sure they'll pick up, but that'll be a bump. But still, it's not that insane. So I think I would treat this offseason, and you don't like make this publicly known, but let's use this offseason to go all in next offseason. Because if 2025 resembles 2024, and this is as real as we hope it is, and I got some dudes, but maybe guys coming off their first contract, 50-year veterans, and then still not go crazy with the cap. And if this is as real as we think it is, then we're pushing all the chips in the middle a year from now.
And you do have to start leaning on some of the other guys you selected, like Ben Sinnott was a name you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah.
He should probably be somebody that is a featured member now in year 2, right? Johnny Newton, who they drafted early in the second round. They said they had a first round grade on him. He fell into the second round. He didn't have an offseason. He didn't have training camp. He had that foot surgery. I would expect he's a lot better in year 2, having a healthy offseason and getting ready to come into the year. And, he wasn't amazing as a rookie. And I think, it's really hard to just jump in. You had no practice, and all of a sudden in the middle of the season, here you go. All right, now you're in the NFL and you didn't get any offseason. Yeah. So that's tough for him. So he should be better. Maybe Luke McCaffrey's a little bit better, a little bit more dynamic, sort of a slot guy, give you some return ability or whatever. So beyond,
Sanders still looked good. You got a lot out of him.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
like a foundational player.
So yeah, as long as the development continues for those guys, you should be better in some of those spots, and you can build off of that as well. So the other question here about the Washington Commanders draft specific was whether or not you go best player available. David says, do you think the Commanders should take the best player available at pick 29 or try to pick the best player to fill a specific need? It seems like they've got a few.
That's a tough one. I mean, that always is a brutal question.
If you have that many needs, I think best player available is always the way to go, especially if you're that team. Because, again, quarterback is the only position that you probably can't utilize somebody. Maybe defensive tackle wouldn't be smart again,
Yeah.
Although at pick 29, that might be a sweet spot for defensive tackle again this year. So we'll see who's there for him. But whether it's an edge rusher or a wide receiver or a defensive back, an offensive lineman, I think you're in a great spot to go be. I'm all about best player available, especially where the Commanders are. I think that's.
I was leaning that way too, and basically took the words out of my mouth in that. What positions would I? Best player available is great, but most times it's like best player available at one of these 2 positions or 3 positions, or how most teams handle it. For Washington, I might be like best player available anywhere but D tackle and quarterback. Okay. And it is a great D tackle draft. You wouldn't want to turn your back there, but you have 3 really good ones. It looks like everything else you could use a difference maker. I can't believe this linebacker fell. All right, I can't believe this safety fell. Kyle Hamilton type fall, grab them, whatever. I tend to lean that way because I do think you need this last draft class looks very promising. The quarterback aside, of course, we know he's great, but the ones before that, where are your young foundational players on rookie deals still? They're still a little light in that department,
Absolutely. And if you're the Commanders, you probably have the opportunity to do both. You can kind of view the draft and feel like, okay, we're probably going to have a really good player at one of these few positions. So let's add the other positions in free agency and spend while we can. And we've got the cap space, and we know we got a rookie quarterback contract, so they can probably attack it from both angles pretty aggressively. And you got to love where they're at.
I mean, worst case scenario, you would hate for McLaurin and Payne and Jonathan Allen next year to look like, oh, they're starting to be declining players. Like it happens quick in this league. It'd be nice to have a 3rd-year guy that's a star.
Next, we had a question about what if Matthew Stafford retires. Well, since that question was asked, Matthew Stafford announcing he's not going to retire. And are there any big-time coordinator hires that could have the same impact that we've seen for the offense and defensive coordinators for the Philadelphia Eagles next year? This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time and the Game Time app. Attending NFL playoff games is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together, and specifically Super Sunday. I mean, what a game to be able to attend. I have never attended one, but I do remember going to NFL playoff games, going to baseball playoff games. I've been to quite a few, and it is so fun. NHL, NBA playoff games. The college tournament is upcoming, and those tournament games are phenomenal. Usually you can get 2-for-1s and get in and watch multiple games. So the energy of those types of playoff atmospheres is a second to none. And you can find all of those types of tickets at Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, especially if you're going to a big outdoor concert or a sporting event with potentially 60,000 seats. Game Time Picks helps you narrow that down. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Not only sporting event tickets, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, all the tickets near you. Fantastic deals on last-minute tickets. $20 off your first purchase and use code LOCKEDONNFL. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So we did have a question about Matthew Stafford. I just wanted to kind of go over this a little bit because Matthew Stafford, and he has had a lot of injuries recently. Clearly, he's still playing really good football. And I wonder if this year was, because remember last offseason, it felt like, Stafford going to retire. Aaron Donald did retire. Sean McVay might move on. He's maybe a little burnt-out, and they had kind of like really fallen flat after their stars and scrubs build, and they won a Super Bowl and they went for it. And then it was going to be, a tough rebuild, dude. Does everyone want to go through this rebuild? Well, they got back on
and even the trade deadline. Oh, you can get Cooper Kupp, and they're right. If they don't win that one game, you're right.
The Rams are 1-4, and we're like, Rams are about to blow this thing up.
Right. Trade for Stafford. Right.
Yeah. And now Stafford's like, well, this is kind of fun. Let's get back on the horse one more time, right? Let's keep this going. So Matthew Stafford announcing he's going to come back and he's going to play again in 2025. So good news for the Rams there, and still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC.
Yeah, and I think the world's just a better place when he's playing football. I think he's always been an underappreciated kind of all-time great, Hall of Fame type dude. I'm not saying he's John Elway, but he's a great, great player, and I love watching him play. And they won a playoff game, so why not run it back? I get it. A couple things. I wonder how they'll handle the offseason. It's not a great quarterback draft, but there's probably some day two guys that you might consider to groom. Or are they just going to be like, screw it, we're the Rams. We're going to try to win the Super Bowl this year. I just think they're an aggressive organization.
Oh, dude, yeah, they're the Rams. Yeah. You know what they did is they're like, all right, we get to do it again. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go.
Picks. That first-round pick's going somewhere else. They're going to bring in Myles Garrett or something, right? Trade 3 first-round picks for him.
Yeah.
Something crazy like that. I would not be shocked at all if the Rams were like, we're going for it. Let's get over that hump.
I wonder if Cooper Kupp is back, but other than that, they're pretty young, and so much would change, but I might pick them to win the West again.
Man, with the way they ended the season, and
maybe
their roster is going to be better.
It's going to be better. Defense should be better. You're older on defense, I think helps.
Yeah,
wouldn't be shocked if they draft an O-lineman, a tackle. Jackson's up, and they're going to run the ball, and McVay's really good at what he does, and Stafford's a star. So they'll be in the hunt.
NFC West is potentially going to be a really good division, an interesting competitive division next year, because it's hard to bank on just one team, and you can make the argument for any of the 4 teams to have a really awesome season and potentially a big step up for the Arizona Cardinals that looked better than the Rams to start the year, and they kind of flip-flop halfway through the season. The 49ers, healthy 49ers, should be a lot better than they were last year.
Than
they were before. And the Seahawks have some talent as well.
Second-year head coach, learn the ropes a little bit. And, new offensive coordinator change. I mean, this is the beginning of the season of eternal optimism, where every team thinks they're going to be better next year than this year. But I can make a pretty strong case that 3 or 4 of those teams are better than they were this year.
Absolutely. A question from Randy here. This is a good one. What were the most impactful coordinator hires, and could any of these coordinators have the impact of a Vic Fangio, like a Vic Fangio did for the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024?
Help me rack my brain here a little bit, but I am going to Dennis Allen with the Bears. I mean, I know that that's not an incumbent head coach, but I think he's a really good defensive coordinator, and I didn't think a whole lot of him as a head coach. And serious Saints, Sean Payton through Dan Campbell ties there, obviously, with this new Bears regime. So I could see that being better. I think the Colts change makes some sense. Anarumo.
Anarumo. Yeah, see, Anarumo, I think, was an underrated one. He was a guy that people were talking about head coach interviews last year, and obviously the Bengals defense was just not good this year. But part of it was because of the personnel, right? And so Anarumo kind of got a raw deal. I think he's a fantastic hire and could be one of those guys that. And I don't know if the rest of the roster is ready. And all of a sudden, the Colts are going to be in the Super Bowl now because they hired Anarumo. But I think it was a phenomenal hire, a well-respected veteran defense coordinator that should have that unit playing better. And I was really kind of down on the whole cover 3 thing. That
me too. Enough's enough. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was leaning towards. Is any change there probably is good to shake it up, let alone a guy that's been pretty darn accomplished.
I would like to be able to say the 49ers bringing Robert Saleh back. I think he is a better coordinator. I think they upgraded there.
Yeah.
But it's also still the same scheme that they've been running. But he was kind of the architect of it along with Kyle Shanahan. They kind of worked this thing through. And then their linebackers coach, D'Amico Ryans, came up and ran the same scheme as well. Then he left, and then they kind of struggled with Wilkes and Sorensen for a year, trying to force them into the same scheme and kept trying to run the same deal. But the guys that were there that cultivated the scheme weren't there to run it anymore. So that was difficult on the 49ers. So bringing Robert Saleh back is absolutely going to help, and it's going to be better scheme-wise on defense for the 49ers and his energy on the sideline. So it could be super impactful, but it's not like they're changing schemes. So I don't know if it's going to be that big of a difference. It just is probably just going to be a better version of what it already was.
Okay. Another one I came up with too just now is it's a lot like the Bears conversation, but I think Josh McDaniels with the Patriots pays off heavily. And I think a lot of people misconstrue him as, and why I could call it the same as the Bears, was bad head coach, good coordinator. I mean, I think that's exactly who McDaniels is. And I think people misconstrue him as, if it wasn't for Brady, we'd never be talking about this guy. I don't think that's true. I mean, people think he is an offensive wizard, and I think he's going to be really, really good for Drake May, but I don't know who's catching the ball and blocking for him.
And I know he's a head coach, but he's also coordinating the offense there with Chicago Bears too. So the Ben Johnson, Dennis Allen could be a really nice combo for the Bears, but we got to wait and see because the Bears somehow find a way to screw this up every single time.
I was just saying, I think the Bears got the best coaching bump overall.
Yes.
But they'll screw it up. I mean, haven't we been down this road,
Look, if they got that right and they got a super talented quarterback, can they not be as good as the Washington Commanders were this year? Their total roster is as good or better than the Commanders was.
If we take quarterback aside or Williams becomes that type of player, I'd probably rather the Bears roster.
Right. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, they got dudes on defense, and I think they'll build no line this offseason too,
Chicago Bears, Super Bowl 60.
See if Ben Johnson's a good coach or not, but he's got some good help. I like his hires.
I'll always think back to the trick plays that he was pulling off against the Bears when he was with the Lions too. That there had to be something behind that, right? He was giving them a little extra in a game they didn't need it. It's like, hey, guys, yeah. All right. Fantastic stuff. Thanks to all the questions. Apologies to the questions we did not get to. We always get so many good ones every single week. If you want to get involved in next week's mailbag, getting ready for Super Bowl 59, hit us up on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.